Congratulations, you've just found the number one over 50 health and wellness podcast on the planet. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert and the founder of the Silver Edge, and I am on a mission to help men and women just like you build lean, strong, healthy, capable bodies they love for the rest of their lives. Today's podcast is brought to you by Legion Athletics. Legion makes supplements with all of the good stuff like natural ingredients and clinically effective doses without any of the gimmicks like proprietary blends or hype. Look, here's the deal. You do not need supplements to build muscle, lose fat, or get healthy, but the right ones can definitely help. I personally love Legion's whey protein as well as their pre-workout. That's called Pulse. You guys can learn more by heading over to silveredgepartners.com and clicking on the Legion icon. Just make sure you use coupon code SILVEREDGE to save 20% off your first order or double loyalty points on future orders. Again, that's silveredgepartners.com, and make sure you use coupon code SILVEREDGE at checkout. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with today's show. Okay, folks, so let's talk about cardio. As it turns out, this is episode 330, and this is the first episode that I've done that's dedicated to the subject of cardio. So I wanted to start today's discussion on why that is. How would I have a show titled Over 50 Health and Wellness Podcast and not discuss cardio up until now, until episode 330? Now, to be fair, we've talked about cardio in lots of past episodes, but we've never dedicated an episode just to the subject of cardio. And here's why. There seems to be an over-reliance on cardio, especially when it comes to the subject of weight loss, and even more so for our generation. So men and women in their 50s and 60s, we were told that in order to lose weight, we should eat less and move more. That's the typical prescription we're given when it comes to losing weight. And move more typically meant doing some form of cardio. For us guys, a lot of us, that meant running. And for you ladies, that meant some sort of aerobics class. And of course, there was a lot of crossover there and other forms of aerobics. But for the longest time, cardio was the predominant prescription for exercise or for movement when it came to weight loss. Now, it's important to note that cardio is critical for overall health and well-being, and it's a critical piece of healthy aging, but it is a lousy tool for weight loss. Or actually, let me back up. It's a lousy tool for long-term fat loss, especially when it's used as the primary tool for weight loss, and even more so for those of us over 50. Now, before we go any further, let's back up and take a minute or two and just bear with me. I'm going to nerd out for a minute. But what you need to know is that there are two types of muscle fibers. Now, this is in general. I'm speaking in generalization. But in general, our muscles are made up of slow twitch fibers, known as type 1 muscle fibers, and fast twitch muscle fibers, also known as type 2. So we have type 1 slow twitch muscle fibers and type 2 fast twitch muscle fibers. The type 1 slow twitch muscles are not very strong and they're not very big, but these suckers can go all day. They are great at endurance. Now, your type 2 fast twitch muscle, on the other hand, they're big and strong, but they are wimps when it comes to endurance. They can't really go the distance. Now, a great graphic example of this is head over to Google, and I want you to Google elite marathon runner, or better yet, an elite marathon 50-year-old runner. And what you're going to see there is a very skinny, very frail, probably very weak individual. That person is, again, skinny and frail, and they're very specialized because running 26.2 miles is a very specialized thing. So they're not very strong. And what they are showing is a great expression of that type 1 slow twitch muscle. Now I want you to Google elite sprinter. Now, this person's body, guy or gal, whoever comes up in your Google search there, they're jacked. They have muscle on their body. These folks are a great expression of type 2 fast twitch muscle. So I think you're starting to get the idea here. That marathon runner is skinny, but not particularly strong. That sprinter is very strong, but he or she ain't going to run 26.2 miles. Certainly not without stopping. Maybe they can sprint and then take a 5-minute rest and then sprint and take a 5-minute rest. It's going to take them a while to do a marathon, right? So that's the difference if we're thinking about type 1, type 2. And again, these are generalizations, but just keep in mind that your body's musculature is made up of type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. And here's the deal. We do a really good job, or at least we do a decent job, of hanging on to our type 1 slow twitch muscles as we age, but we preferentially lose type 2 muscle as we age. So remember, type 1 is that with the endurance, that's your endurance muscle, your go all day muscle. That's your cardio muscle, if we think about it that way. And your type 2 is going to be, think more, that's your strength training muscle. And we're preferentially losing these as we age. Now, there is a term, I'm sure you've probably heard it kicked around. It's called sarcopenia, and it refers to age-related muscle loss. It's related to osteopenia, which is age-related bone density loss. Now, here's what's important to know. That both sarcopenia and osteopenia have way less to do with you getting older. In other words, you're not losing muscle or bone density because you're getting older. You're losing this muscle and bone density because you're not using them. So I wanted to throw the osteopenia in there because anytime we do strength training to build that type 2 muscle fiber, we are also building stronger bones. And the same is not necessarily true, or at least not in the same way when we do like cardio, which is good for our type 1 muscles. So there you go. There's the difference really between type 1 slow twitch, type 2 fast twitch muscles. You've got both of those in your body. As you age, that type 2 is probably leaving unless you have some sort of professionally designed age-appropriate functional strength training program that you're following and applying the principles of progressive overload, all the things we've talked about in the other 329 episodes up until now. But here's where the magic is when we talk about that type 2 fast twitch muscle, that muscle that we only get from strength training. And that is that muscle is metabolically expensive. So what do I mean by that? So your type 1 muscle, that slow twitch muscle that's on your body, is very metabolically efficient. It doesn't take a whole lot of calories to keep that muscle on your body and keep it active. However, that type 2 muscle that we get from strength training is incredibly metabolically expensive. And what that means is it requires a lot more calories burning just to keep it on your body. So what that means is that for every bit of type 2 fast twitch muscle you have on your body has to burn more calories just to keep that on your body. So in other words, you have a increased calorie burn even while you're at rest, even if you only have a modest amount of that type 2 fast twitch muscle. So know this, because that type 2 muscle is very metabolically expensive, meaning it's going to take more calories to maintain it, your body's only going to keep the bare minimum of type 2 fast twitch muscle that it thinks it needs. And it determines this by the demands that you put on your body. So if you're somebody who's always going out for a run, or you're on the treadmill, or you're doing some kind of a class or Peloton or something like that, you are sending a signal to your body that, hey, I need this type 1 slow twitch muscle because that's what you're really using in those types of activities. But you're also sending a signal to your metabolism that, hey, it's okay to pare down this type 2 muscle. We don't need it. We're not using it. We don't have a need for it. And it's metabolically expensive. So let's get rid of it. Now, if you're an OG listener here to this podcast, you have heard me say multiple times, we're big fans here of Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and she's kind of coined the term that muscle is the organ of longevity. It's the organ of health, and it's certainly the organ of healthy aging. And specifically, the muscle that Dr. Gabrielle Lyon is talking about is this type 2 muscle. It's not the muscle that we get when we go for a jog. It's not the muscle that we get when we walk. And yes, we should do those things. But it's that type 2 muscle that makes us healthy, that actually makes us look good. Guys, you want to get that lean jacked look, and ladies, you want to get that lean toned look. You're not going to get there with Zumba or Peloton or being a slave to the treadmill. You're just not, because you're only working on type 1 muscle. You're not doing anything for that type 2 fast twitch muscle. And so when it comes to building a healthy, capable, lean, strong body, what we really want is a mix between healthy type 1 muscle and lots of healthy type 2 fast twitch muscle. And I also want you to note that an over-reliance of cardio is actually a competing signal for type 2 muscle, meaning that the more cardio we do, the less type 2 muscle we can carry. So think about it. It makes sense. When you Googled elite marathon runner, you didn't see big jacked dudes or big toned muscular women running marathons, certainly not at the elite level. These were very frail, skinny looking individuals because they have pared away all type 2 muscle. If you think about it, if you want to run 26.2 miles, it's not in your best interest to be carrying around a whole bunch of weight, even if it is some sexy, good-looking, healthy type 2 muscle. So all of that is pared down. So those of us that rely on cardio, and even worse yet, cardio and low calorie for our quote unquote weight loss, what we're seeing there is we're just paring away. Yes, we're losing some fat when we do that, but we're 100% losing some of that type 2 muscle, which is we want to cling to that muscle. We want to critically, desperately cling to that and build as much of that as we can and maintain it for our healthy aging. Also, I want you to note this. Cardio is a great way for losing weight temporarily. And I say weight, and I'm throwing that in air quotes here, because what I'm talking about is probably 40% muscle, 60% fat. And muscle building is a great way to lose fat long term. In other words, turning your metabolism from a fat storer to a fat burner. One of the most disastrous prescriptions for those of us over 50 for weight loss is to eat low calorie and pile on the cardio. You're going to lose about 40% muscle and 60% fat. And I'm here to tell you that's not a fair trade. That's not what you'd want. You're just going to end up being a weaker, smaller, and less healthy version of yourself. Let me repeat that because this is so often put out there. Want to lose weight? Hit the treadmill, go low calorie. Well, if you do that, and that's all you do, you're going to end up weaker, a little bit smaller. You're going to end up less healthier. So you're going to be a weaker, smaller, less healthy version of yourself. If you have tuned into this podcast, I don't think that's what you want. In your mind, you're like, I got these 10, 20, 30, however many pounds to lose. And that's what you're primarily focused on. But when we think about weight loss and our mind goes immediately to a diet and to some form of cardio, know that that's a trap. And I'm guessing there's a bunch of you listening to this right now that are probably thinking, I've tried that over and over and over again, and it works until it doesn't. And then I try it again, and it works until it doesn't. And then I gain the weight back. And that's how we set ourselves up for failure. By going on these low-calorie diets, pouring on all this cardio, losing a little bit of weight, feeling good about ourselves, but we end up in an unhealthy, unsustainable place. And then, of course, we gain all that weight back. We go back to doing what we were before. So anyways, that is a long-winded way of justifying how I have a podcast called the Over 50 Health and Wellness Podcast. I've done over 300 episodes, and this is the first time we're actually dedicating an episode solely on cardio. So with that long-winded justification out of the way, let's talk about cardio. And full disclosure, I am a huge fan of cardio. For those of you that don't know my personal story, actually my active life in terms of really focusing on my health for the first time came in my 30s. Now, don't get me wrong. I was by no means healthy in my 30s. I smoked cigarettes for a lot of my 30s. I was doing drugs, drinking heavily throughout my 30s, to be sure. But I also got hooked on marathons. I did my first marathon in my 30s with my brothers. I went on to do a bunch more marathons. From there, I went on to do a ton of triathlons. That was kind of my thing. I've got a bit of an addictive personality. I kind of went down a rabbit hole. But at any rate, all that crashed and burned. I stopped cold turkey. In my 40s, I found myself actually as unhealthy and sick as I've ever been in my life. I was overweight, metabolically unhealthy, landed myself in the hospital for a little while. And that's really what set this whole thing in motion. And I'll tell you this. I did spend a few days in a hospital with this health scare. I thought I was having a heart attack. Good news, I wasn't. But I was very unhealthy. And I decided right then and there that I had young kids, a beautiful young wife. I had a lot going for me. I was crushing it at work. And I didn't want to be that dude that dropped dead at age 40 from a heart attack. And everybody was like, hey, you remember Kev? Yeah, whatever happened to him? Oh, he dropped dead of a heart attack. What, really? Who would have known, right? So I didn't want that to be me. And that's really what sent me down this rabbit hole of trying to to really optimize my health. I started out by, I just wanted to be not sick. And of course, my doctor gave me the prescription of, Kev, you're going to need to eat less and start working out. And that working out, the only thing I'd ever known was really cardio. I'd never picked up a barbell or dumbbell in my life. I'd never done any form of strength training. So I went back to what I had done in my 30s, which was a whole bunch of running. So I started running again. I was trying to be careful what I ate. And I lost a little bit of weight, but I went from being kind of fat, not obese. I was maybe 20 pounds overweight. So I wasn't very overweight, but I was ridiculously weak. And all that running and all that trying to watch my diet, which included me eating a couple more salads and trying not to have so much dessert, but of course still drinking daily alcohol, I ended up just in this horrible skinny fat condition. So I kept adding more cardio, and it just wasn't working. I wasn't getting the same enjoyment from it, or addictive pleasure, I guess you could say, that I was, a decade earlier in my 30s. But at some point, I switched my focus from just doing cardio to strength training. That's another story for another day. I heard Dr. Jonathan Sullivan on a podcast. He wrote a book called The Barbell Prescription for people over 40, strength training for people over 40. That's how I got introduced to strength training. I started to play around with that, and that's where I started to see amazing results in my health and my physique. A bunch of things came together for me when I started to prioritize strength training and just make cardio kind of my side dish. So I just wanted to preface this by saying, look, I've got a long history of doing tons of endurance cardio, and I'm back doing lots and lots of cardio today, as you're going to hear. But let's dig into a cardio prescription for you. And we're going to start here. Let's just kind of make some definitions. What do we mean when we say cardio? And basically, cardio is it's exercise or movement that we do to improve our cardiovascular health, in essence. And we can look at this a couple of different ways. The first way is we can say, hey, we have these really three phases. We have this low intensity steady state. You may see that abbreviated as LISS, L-I-S-S, low intensity steady state cardio. We have moderate intensity steady state. That's your MISS. And then we have HIIT, HIIT, which is your high intensity interval training. So if we think about that low intensity steady state, that's walking. That's even purposeful walking. Then when we move into that moderate intensity steady state, that's things like jogging, running, swimming, biking, things like that. Then we move into HIIT, that high intensity. That's typically going to be 5 to 30 seconds of near max effort with a longer rest period, and then we're going to repeat that. So really short, intense bouts of exercise there with HIIT. The other really popular way of discussing cardio, and I'm guessing everybody here has heard of this, and that's the 5 zones. There are zone 1 through zone 5. And what that refers to is a percent of your max heart rate. Now, if you Google, how do I find my max heart rate? The first thing you're going to see is an equation that states, take the number 220 and subtract your age, and that is going to be your max heart rate. So for me, I'm 60 years old right now, almost 61. So 220 minus 60 is 160, and that would say that's my max heart rate. Now, it isn't. That's not even really very close for me. But in general, especially for a sedentary person, that would be a good starting place. 220 minus your age is roughly your max heart rate. So again, not particularly accurate, but it is a good stake in the ground for a lot of us. And the way we would look then at our zones 1 through 5, is zone 1 is going to be very light activity. So that's going to be 50 to 60% of your max heart rate. So that would be, say, walking. And this is great for active recovery. Actually, as we're going to talk about in a minute, everybody should walk. We should all be doing zone 1 every single day. This is just general movement. Fantastic for active recovery, circulation, even for some of your cardiovascular health, for fat burn, all of that. We should all be doing that. Zone 2 is going to be light work. So this is 60 to 70%. This is going to include things like brisk or purposeful walking. This is great for basic fat burning and basic endurance. Zone 3 is going to be your more moderate workload. So this is 70 to 80% of your max heart rate. This is great for improving your aerobic fitness. Zone 4, moving up from there, is going to be really hard work. This is going to be 80 to 90% of your max heart rate. So this is great for athletic performance. Those of you that love to play sports, like if you're in a basketball league or an adult soccer league, a master soccer league, you're going to be doing these short bursts of 80 to 90% max heart rate pretty frequently. So that's zone 4 work. And then zone 5, this is really hard work. This is 90 to 100%. This is maxing out your heart rate. So this is that HIIT that we were talking about, that high intensity interval training. But I tell you, as opposed to now, most of us these days, we have devices that will tell us your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or your Oura Ring or your Whoop band. All these things will tell you what your heart rate is, and we can calculate our max heart rate and decide what zone we're in and stay in that zone. But here's a really easy way to break up your cardio, whether you're in, say, in one of the zone 1 or zone 2 or in zone 4 or zone 5, and it's the breathing test. If you and I were working out together and we were doing zone 1, meaning we were taking a leisurely walk together, we'd have a conversation just like this. There would be no break in the conversation. We could concentrate and we could carry on a conversation just like normal people. Now, if you and I then bumped up to zone 2, so now let's say we're power walking. We're purposefully, we're getting it on. We're getting a good work. Our conversation might start to sound a little bit more kind of like this. So in other words, our heart rate's elevated, our respiration's a little bit quicker, so we're not talking so much in a normal tone. Then as we move up into that zone 3, that 70 to 80%, so now we're in a jog, let's say, and our conversations probably sounds a little bit more kind of like this. And then we get up to zone 4, we get into that 80 to 90% of our max heart rate, probably not talking a whole lot. And if we are, it's going to be sound a little bit like, how much longer do we have to go, right? So we're really huffing and puffing. We got that shallow mouth breathing probably at this point. Our heart rate is, very elevated, 80 to 90%. And then if we're in zone 5, we're doing some sort of a HIIT workout together, we're not talking to each other. That's out of the question. There is no talking. So think about the breathing test, and that will help you determine what zone you're in. That way you're not really nerding out like, I need to be between exactly 140 and 150 heartbeats per minute for this workout. If you love nerding out on that kind of stuff, fantastic, go for it. If not, just know that you can use the talking test to tell if you're in one of those early zones or in one of those deeper zones. All right, so let's talk about how those of us over 50 should incorporate cardio into our healthy aging lifestyle. And first things first, we're going to start with zone 1. We should all be walking. So walking is the table stakes, and we should walk every single day. So a good rule of thumb is we want to aim for a minimum of 7,000 steps a day. Now, if you're only getting 3,000 steps a day, maybe your goal is 4,000 steps this week and maybe up to 5,000 steps next week. You want to gradually get to where you're at a minimum of 7,000 steps a day. And those of you that are already getting a minimum of 7,000 steps, make your goal 10,000, right? That's a good round number to try and get 10,000 steps every single day. Now, before we go any further, we need to take a minute and back up and talk about your current metabolic state, because everything else I'm going to tell you about cardio is dependent upon your metabolism. So I want all of you, whether you have a trash metabolism or a roaring metabolism, we should all be walking. Again, that's the table stakes. That is the foundation of our cardio program. I know that a lot of you are saying, well, wait, walking is not really cardio. It kind of is. And for our purposes, it is, right? We'll call it zone 1. We should be doing lots of that. But we do need to talk about your current metabolic state. Is your metabolism currently, today, a small glowing ember, or is it a raging forest fire? Now, for those of you that aren't sure, we do have a free metabolism quiz up on our website. So that's silveredgefitness.com. And I think at the top of the page, you can click that says, click here for a free metabolism test or something like that. But there is a quiz that will rate you on whether your metabolism is a glowing ember, is it a small campfire, or is it a roaring bonfire, something like that. So those of you that aren't sure where you fall in terms of metabolic health from this perspective, right, from what we're talking about, go over to silveredgefitness.com and make sure you take that quiz. But here's the deal. With our one-on-one clients who come to us for weight loss, and remember, those of you listening to this podcast, you're sophisticated enough now to know that we don't want to lose weight over 50. We want to lose fat. There's a big difference. Again, if I just cut your calories and get you doing cardio, you're going to lose some weight, but a lot of that's going to be muscle, specifically that type 2 muscle. No bueno. We don't want that. That makes you smaller, frailer, weaker, less healthy. We want the opposite of that. So the first thing we do with our one-on-one clients is they come in, we do a metabolism check. We find out where they are. And look, I'm going to be straight with you. About 90%, heck, I bet 95% of the people that come into our program do not start with a diet, because they've got crappy metabolisms. Their metabolisms have slowed to a crawl. And to be fair, we talk about metabolisms and broken metabolisms so much that that's tends to be the type of client that we are selecting to come into our program. So we probably have a bias to us coaches here at the Silver Edge. We joke all the time. We're like, holy moly, is everybody over 50 under eating and overweight? And of course they're not. But it seems that way to us because the vast majority of you folks coming in for one-on-one coaching are in that position. You probably have listened to a few of these podcasts and went, wait, maybe it's my metabolism that's making me fail at all these repeated diet attempts. But at any rate, as these people are coming in, we do a metabolism check, say 95% of them fail. They got crappy metabolism, just slow, sluggish metabolisms. They do not start a diet and they do not start cardio. The reason being is that they are overweight and under eating, and typically they are under muscled and over fat, which is a recipe for a sluggish, slow metabolism. And by slow metabolism, I mean a slow calorie burn, not burning very many calories at rest every day. So we want to fix that before we start dieting, before we start prescribing any kind of cardio and jumping around and all that fun stuff. So before these clients start a diet, because we do want to do a diet, because we do want to remedy this overfat problem, we have to work on the under-muscled, slow metabolism problem first. That's primary. If we don't fix that, we're not going to fix the overfat problem, at least not long-term. We maybe can fix it a little bit, kind of, sort of, in the short term, but we're not going to fix it long-term if we don't solve for this slow metabolism under-muscle piece first. And when we fix that under-muscled, slow metabolism problem first, this gives that person a much better chance to be successful when it comes time for a diet. And by successful, I mean to lose fat and to lose it sustainably, lifelong. All right, so by now you might be like, okay, Kev, I think you're gone down another rabbit hole here. You're ranting and raving. What has all this got to do with cardio? Great question. We want these folks, these one-on-one clients with the sluggish metabolism, we want their metabolism to speed up. We want their metabolism to go from a glowing ember to a roaring bonfire, and a bunch of cardio and calorie restriction is going to do the exact opposite of that. So for these clients with crappy metabolisms, we start them with walking. We tell our clients in this first phase, this metabolic restoration phase, that walking is your cardio. Yep. Just walking. And for clients that come in that are currently doing classes and boot camps and F45 and Orange Theory and Peloton and Zumba, etc., we just ask them to stop. We just ask them to stop that cold turkey, and we ask them to just walk and replace all that cardio with maybe 3 days a week of strength training. Remember that cardio is a competing signal to muscle building, and we want to build muscle to increase metabolism as well as health and functionality, and that's our main goal in this first phase, right? We're trying to rebuild this metabolism. Now, just a side note, you may have heard me say F45 and Orange Theory, or I go to a strength class and it's where we do circuit strength training. That's not strength training in the sense that I'm talking about strength training. That's aerobics with weight. So if you're in some kind of a class where you have dumbbells and maybe you're doing some overhead presses, and then you're going to switch up and do some jumping jacks, then you're going to go to another station where you do maybe bench presses and some kind of a row, and then you go to another station and you're doing sit-ups and something else. Know that that's not strength training the way I'm talking about strength training. That falls under cardio. That's conditioning. That's aerobics with weights, basically, or cardio with weights. So just a little side note there. But let's just say that you're already a metabolic badass. Your metabolism is roaring along as you're listening to this. Or maybe you've gone through our coaching program and we've fixed your metabolism problem. So now your metabolism is roaring along. You're strong, you're fit, you're capable. How should you dose cardio? What's the best prescription here for healthy aging? And how do we fit cardio into our lifestyle? Now, I personally am a huge fan of HIIT training. Remember, HIIT is our high intensity interval training. It's short, it's intense. It works with muscle building efforts and not against muscle building efforts. Think about our endurance runners. So that long, slow endurance, or that medium intensity over hours and hours and hours, that sends a competing signal to muscle building. But these short, intense workouts actually require fast twitch muscle and therefore help us build and maintain fast twitch muscle. So that's why I'm a big fan of HIIT training, especially for those of us over 50. So remember, these are short, very intense sessions. So think of things like sprinting, the assault bike. So that's the bike where you're also cranking on the handles as well as the pedals, jump rope, Tabatas, etc. I just recently hung a heavy bag in my backyard in a branch of a tree. So if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a boxing bag. It's filled with sand. So it's a great big bag that's heavy. And I go out there and I punch on it. I wail on that thing for a few minutes at a time. That is a great high intensity workout cardio session. So when it comes to HIIT, this high intensity interval training, I'm a big fan of starting really gradually, especially those of you that haven't worked out in this kind of modality in the past. I say start with one session per week and then just gradually increase that intensity to where you can really put out that 90 to 100% intensity in these sessions. And then you'll gradually over time, maybe add another HIIT session to your week. So you're up to 2 or 3, and you're going to do these on your off days from your strength training days, or maybe right after your strength training sessions. But keep in mind that these sessions are in fact short and sweet. Now, before I sign off on this cardio episode, let me talk to you endurance nuts out there. And look, I say this with full love. I was an endurance nut. I was obsessed with marathoning and triathlon for quite some time. So it does hold a near and dear place in my heart. But just know that I am not a fan of endurance training for those of us in our 50s and 60s, mainly for the reasons we just discussed, right? That we're trying to add and maintain type 2 muscle. We want to build that. We want to increase our metabolism. As we know, that long, steady state cardio is going to be counter to us building muscle. But it's also really, really rough on our hormones, especially testosterone. And this goes for guys and as well as ladies. Testosterone is important for both of us. And while we could get away with really long, grueling endurance sessions when we were younger, it's less so as we get older, right? We already know that ladies, you're moving into or out of your menopause, and guys, we're moving through andropause, where our testosterone is gradually starting to decline. We want to do everything we can to shore those things up, and doing tons and tons of really long endurance type cardio is going to erode that. So I just wanted to put that out there. That's one of the reasons, that's the main reason really why I really like HIIT workouts or more intense short workouts for those of us over 50. They are more conducive to muscle building, muscle preserving, and it's much better for your hormonal health. Now, that being said, if marathoning or ultra running or triathlons are your jams, here's what I'd recommend for you. You are an athlete, so start acting like one. If you are willing to sacrifice some health benefits for a performance goal, in other words, I want to win my age division in this marathon or triathlon, or I'm going to finish this ultra running race, you need to act like an athlete, meaning you have a season, that's typically your race season. You have a postseason, an off season, and a preseason. Now, during season, this is your race season, go for it. Do what you got to do. But then in postseason, you cut way back on the miles, on the cardio, and you focus on recovery. And then in the off season, you're going to cut even further back on cardio. So I know a lot of you marathoners are like, yeah, I'll move from 80 miles a week down to 40 miles a week. No. Go to 10 miles a week and focus on strength training. When we do this, we're going to build up some of that type 2 muscle. We are going to injury proof our body so that next season, when race season comes around, we'll be stronger. It's not like you're going to bulk up like Arnold Schwarzenegger or She-Ra. You're not, I promise you. But just putting a modest amount of that type 2 muscle back on your body, getting yourself healthy, getting yourself strong. And then in preseason, you're going to taper off some of that strength training as you start adding more and more of your endurance activity in. Okay, so let's wrap this up. When it comes to cardio, we're all going to walk every single day. Remember, we said that's table stakes. I want you doing a minimum of 7,000 steps every single day. Gold standard really is 10,000 steps a day. Be consistent with that. Next up, we're going to dose our cardio from there, depending on how healthy or unhealthy our metabolism is. If we have a slow, sluggish metabolism, let's fix that before we add any more cardio other than walking. And look, if you've got a slow, sluggish metabolism and you're doing a bunch of cardio now, please stop. And then finally, as we transform our metabolisms from a glowing ember into a roaring bonfire, let's start adding some quality cardio into our workout routines, preferably short, sweet, intense HIIT sessions. And I'll finish this episode with this. Here's what I'm currently doing. So I currently lift 3 days a week. So I go to the gym and lift weights 3 days a week. I have a full body routine. Been doing that for quite some time. I play competitive pickleball 3 times a week. So I'm playing really intensely, playing hard for at least 2 hours at a time. I do that 3 days a week. And then I do some sort of short HIIT work. So that high intensity interval. For me, that's most frequently going to be jumping rope. It's going to be sprint work. I'll typically do that right after my strength training workout. Or most recently, I've been working out with my heavy bag out in the yard now that it's gorgeous weather out here. So that's what I'm doing that's how I mix my strength training and my cardio into my week. So that's what a week looks like for me. So there you go, folks. Let's get that heart pumping and let's get in some appropriately dosed cardio. Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you are interested in checking out one of our professionally designed, age-appropriate functional strength training programs, I'll throw a link to those in the show notes for this episode. You can find those on whatever app you're listening to this on, or head over to silveredgefitness.com/330. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. The first is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to please give this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.